When you wake in the quiet blue glow of Vault 111, the world above has already ended. Fallout 4 begins not with destruction, but with stillness, the hum of machines, the soft hiss of preserved air, and the distant memory of life before it all fell apart. Bethesda designed that first moment to feel peaceful rather than horrifying, a slow descent into the new normal of a world that forgot what normal means. The cryogenic pods in Vault 111 were inspired by real experimental freezing chambers used by NASA during the mid 20th century, meant to preserve astronauts for long journeys. In Fallout's lore, the vault was never built for safety at all. It was a quiet test of endurance, how long people could dream without dying. When you step into the sunlight for the first time, the Commonwealth stretches endlessly in ruin. The developers described that moment as the emotional heart of the game, a mirror to Fallout 3's vault door scene, but warmer, softer, filled with the pale light of morning rather than the glare of apocalypse. The dust that floats through the air in that first scene was created by layering 3 separate particle systems, each one drifting at a slightly different speed to mimic pollen, ash, and old insulation. It's one of the most subtle visual effects in gaming, and one most players never even notice. The player's home in Sanctuary Hills was modeled after the optimistic American suburbs of the 1950s. Bethesda's art team built it with deliberately simple geometry, curved counters, baby blue appliances, and bright yellow paint to reflect the false security of pre-war life. The cereal box on the kitchen counter is called Sugar Bombs, a recurring brand throughout the series, first mentioned decades earlier in Fallout 2. Even the neighborhood layout follows a pattern drawn from real Cold War housing developments. Sanctuary was built to feel nostalgic, not just familiar, because Fallout's greatest tragedy isn't that the world ended, it's that it ended smiling. The family robot, Codsworth, is more than comic relief. He represents memory, a mechanical witness who never forgot the people who built him. His voice actor, Stephen Russell, recorded more than 900 names to allow Codsworth to greet players personally. When he says your name for the first time after centuries apart, it feels like a ghost remembering you. Bethesda intentionally programmed his voice to fluctuate slightly in tone, depending on how long it has been since you last spoke to him, as though loneliness wears even on metal. The first settlement you rebuild, also called Sanctuary, is meant to reflect the player's inner state. As you fix roofs and rebuild fences, you aren't just restoring a town, you're restoring rhythm to a broken world. The settlement system itself began as a side experiment, inspired by players who modded Skyrim to create homes. The development team noticed how much satisfaction players found in organizing chaos, so they turned it into a full feature. Each build piece, every wall, light bulb, and chair was designed to snap together like toys from the 1960s, an intentional contrast to the game's grim setting. Preston Garvey, the Minuteman who introduces you to rebuilding, was written to embody the idea of civic hope. His dialogue may be repetitive, but that was part of his design, a man repeating hope over and over until someone listens. His quest structure mirrors how idealism spreads, one settlement at a time. The Minutemen flag itself was modeled on the early American militias of the 1700s, blending colonial and futuristic elements. Bethesda's writers describe the Minutemen not as soldiers, but as reminders proof that even after 2 centuries of ruin, people can still come together to protect each other. Diamond City, the heart of the Commonwealth, was built inside the shell of Boston's historic baseball stadium. The team studied the real Fenway Park in extraordinary detail, mapping its seating, corridors, and scoreboard by hand. The glowing green signs and the repurposed dugouts give the city a feeling of strange coziness, a fortress built from nostalgia. In the lore, the people who founded Diamond City didn't choose the stadium just for shelter. They chose it because it represented safety, community, and cheering crowds. The developers liked the irony that the last safe place in Boston is a monument to a game no one remembers how to play. One of the most charming characters in Diamond City is Piper Wright, the journalist who runs public occurrences. Her personality was inspired by classic reporter tropes from 1940s noir films: bold, fast-talking, always seeking truth. Her newspaper's name comes from an actual colonial publication from 1745, one of the earliest newspapers in America. Piper's voice actress recorded her lines twice, once with full confidence, and again with quieter, more thoughtful delivery. The game alternates between the two depending on player dialogue, creating subtle emotional shifts that most players don't consciously notice. Nick Valentine, the synthetic detective, stands as one of Fallout's most beloved companions. His trench coat and fedora come straight from the golden age of private eye cinema, while his dialogue explores the meaning of humanity. His design, half human, half exposed wiring, reflects the series' obsession with identity and memory. When he calls you kid, there's a quiet sadness in it, the echo of another man's memories still living inside him. His name itself, Valentine, was chosen to sound both hopeful and mournful, a man built for love who can never truly feel it. The super mutants that stalk the Commonwealth were created from a different strain of the forced evolutionary virus than those in the West. Bethesda adjusted their design to make them more muscular and less grotesque, symbolizing a second generation of mutation. Their crude language and obsession with meat aren't just for shock value, they're remnants of human instincts stripped to survival. The developers described them as echoes of soldiers still at war, trapped forever in the body of something too strong to die. One of the game's most mysterious factions, the Institute, was inspired by real-world speculation about underground scientific facilities and Cold War think tanks. Its gleaming white corridors and sterile glass walls contrast sharply with the rusted world above, creating the feeling of heaven-turned laboratory. The color palette of the Institute was chosen intentionally: pure white for clinical control, soft blue for deceitful calm, and warm gold for artificial hope. The synthetic humans they create, known as synths, embody Fallout's oldest question: what does it mean to be alive when memory and flesh can both be replaced? Father, the leader of the Institute, was written as a paradox. He's your child, grown old while you slept, yet emotionally distant, a man who sees logic as mercy. His dialogue changes subtly based on your choices, revealing flashes of regret beneath his calm. The team recorded alternate lines for every major conversation, allowing him to sound proud, disappointed, or quietly broken. Even his office, filled with plants and soft lighting, was designed to feel almost kind, a scientist's illusion of peace, surrounded by inhuman perfection. The Brotherhood of Steel's arrival in the Commonwealth marks a clash of ideologies. Their massive airship, the Prydwen, was named after a legendary vessel from Welsh mythology said to carry heroes between worlds. The ship's interior hum was recorded from a real aircraft carrier engine, layered with the faint vibration of cello strings, giving it a tone that feels both mechanical and alive. Elder Maxon, their leader, is one of the youngest in Brotherhood history, written to embody conviction hardened into arrogance. His voice actor was directed to speak, as if giving sermons instead of orders. The Brotherhood's armor and banners aboard the Prydwen mix medieval imagery with industrial steel, turning technology into religion. Power armor in Fallout 4 changed from an outfit to a machine, something you step into rather than wear. This transformation came from a single developer's sketch of a character climbing into armor like a cockpit. The sound of hydraulics engaging when the armor seals around you was recorded using a mix of car doors, air compressors, and the hiss of a pressure suit. The HUD inside the helmet, with its soft yellow glow, was inspired by submarine periscopes. The team wanted players to feel heavy, safe, and powerful, as if the world outside could finally stop hurting you for a little while. The Commonwealth's radio stations reflect its mood. Diamond City Radio, hosted by Travis Miles, begins awkward and nervous, but gradually grows confident as you help him. That progression mirrors the game's theme of rebuilding identity. Travis's hesitant speech was performed by actor Brandon Hunt, who recorded every line twice, once nervously and once boldly, so that players could hear the difference as he evolves. His transformation into courage is one of the game's gentlest and most human details. The other station, Classical Radio, is a quiet treasure. Its playlist was curated from real public domain recordings of Mozart, Bach, and Tchaikovsky. The static between songs was intentionally left imperfect to make the music feel ghostly, like echoes of a civilization that no longer exists. During late testing, the team discovered that players often left the radio on even during combat, so they adjusted the game's sound mixing to make gunfire fade slightly under the music. The result created an unintentional kind of peace amid chaos. The glowing sea that irradiated crater south of Boston is one of Fallout 4's most haunting locations. Its name was chosen not for beauty, but for irony. It's not a sea at all, just the aftermath of a bomb. The glowing dust that drifts through the air there was made by layering fog textures over invisible water surfaces to reflect light in unpredictable ways. Standing there, surrounded by storms and silence, you realize the world isn't dead. It's still breathing in its own strange way. And then there's Dogmeat, the loyal companion. In Fallout 4, he was modeled after a real German shepherd named River, who belonged to the game's lead level designer. River visited the studio for weeks, while animators captured her movements and sound designers recorded her breathing and barks. The team said she wasn't just reference material, she was family. When River passed away years later, Bethesda released a tribute, thanking her for reminding everyone that companionship is what makes Fallout human. Beyond Sanctuary and the safety of Codsworth's voice, the Commonwealth stretches into a maze of stories half buried in dust. Fallout 4's design philosophy was built around exploration as conversation, the idea that every ruin has something to say, even if it speaks only in silence. Bethesda's artists filled the landscape with more than 300 interior spaces, each one hand-placed and written with its own small memory. A collapsed grocery store might hide a skeleton beside a shopping cart filled with toys. A diner might still have food in its machines, centuries old but lovingly preserved in faded packaging. Every object, from the bent spoons to the broken mirrors, was intentionally weathered to tell time's story without words. One of the most haunting locations in the game is the Dunwich Borer's Quarry, a deep pit filled with strange whispers and religious carvings. It was designed as a spiritual sequel to the Dunwich Building from Fallout 3, which itself was a reference to H.P. Lovecraft's story, The Dunwich Horror. The developers described the borers as a wound in the earth, a place where the line between radiation and nightmare blurs. The glowing stone tablet at its heart was never meant to be fully explained. Its existence is part of Fallout's quiet mythology, proof that some terrors in the wasteland are older than the bombs themselves. Across the map, echoes of Boston's real landmarks shape the player's path. The ruins of the Massachusetts State House, the Charles River, the Bunker Hill Monument, and the USS Constitution all stand transformed yet recognizable. The Constitution, perhaps the most whimsical of them all, was reimagined as a pre-war museum ship retrofitted with rockets. Its crew, a band of malfunctioning robots who still believe they are sailors of the colonial navy, became one of Fallout 4's most memorable quests. The ship's final flight, soaring clumsily over the city before crashing into a building, was inspired by an actual naval myth from the 18th century, a tale of a vessel that tried to fly toward freedom. Bethesda added it to remind players that even in absurdity, the wasteland finds nobility. The small settlements dotting the Commonwealth each have their own stories hidden in the environment. Abernathy Farm, for instance, sits beneath a massive electrical tower to give players a clear landmark visible from afar. Its owners are modeled after real pre-war farmers who refuse to abandon their land. Finch Farm draws its inspiration from the story of Prometheus, its quest about stealing a flame, in this case the shish kebab, a weapon that breathes fire. Taffington Boathouse tells a quieter story through the children's toys scattered across the floor, hinting that its residents were once a family. Bethesda built every settlement like a still photograph from before the end, frozen at the moment when peace turned to panic. The voice acting work in Fallout 4 was one of the largest undertakings in Bethesda's history. The team recorded more than 110,000 individual lines of dialogue, enough to fill more than 20 full-length movies. Courtney Taylor and Brian T. Delaney, the voices of the sole survivor, spent months recording multiple emotional tones for every scene. The goal was to make each choice feel natural, whether you spoke with empathy, sarcasm, or anger. Inunzur's soundtrack was then layered beneath certain lines to subtly shift emotion. Piano chords under sadness, soft violins under doubt. Bethesda's sound engineers described it as painting mood in invisible color. The companions in Fallout 4 were written to reflect facets of humanity. Piper represents curiosity and conscience. Nick stands for memory and forgiveness. Paladin Danse embodies loyalty turned confusion. His story, a quiet tragedy about discovering that faith built on ignorance can't survive truth. Curie, the nurse robot turned synth, symbolizes transformation and the beauty of change. MacCready carries guilt, while Kate carries pain. Strong represents strength without wisdom, and Hancock reflects freedom at the cost of decay. Each companion was designed to mirror a part of the player's soul, so that traveling with them feels like walking beside your own reflection in different forms. The town of Goodneighbor serves as a thematic opposite to Diamond City. Where Diamond City clings to order and nostalgia, Goodneighbor thrives on chaos and individuality. Its design, narrow alleys, flickering neon, and leaning buildings was inspired by film noir and jazz-era cities like New Orleans. Hancock, its mayor, was voiced with deliberate smoothness, modeled after counterculture figures of the 1960s who preached freedom through rebellion. His ghoul face, painted white like a skull, was meant to be both grotesque and theatrical, a reminder that in Fallout, style and decay are never far apart. Fallout 4's lighting engine was overhauled completely from Skyrim's, allowing for dynamic changes based on weather, time of day, and radiation levels. The pale green tint of the Commonwealth during storms wasn't a filter, but a genuine environmental reaction. The game recalculates sunlight through volumetric fog to simulate ionized air. The lightning flashes you see during radiation, storms are delayed by sound to create a sense of vast distance. During testing, the designers noticed players often stop to watch storms roll across the horizon, so they tuned their duration to last slightly longer than normal weather cycles. They wanted the storms to feel less like danger and more like nature's lullaby. The game's power armor stations are among its most satisfying visual designs. The mechanical arms that lift and rotate each armor piece were modeled after real assembly line machines used in automotive factories. When you enter a power armor frame, the locking sound you hear is an authentic hydraulic seal recorded from a NASA pressure chamber. Every armor model, from the rugged T-45 to the advanced X-01, was hand-sculpted digitally, not copy-pasted. The weathering on each suit was applied individually using procedural dirt maps, meaning no two frames are ever exactly alike. Bethesda wanted each one to feel earned, like relics dug up from humanity's forgotten glory. The Red Rocket gas stations, scattered across the map, act as symbols of Fallout's vanished optimism. Their bright logos and red paint are intentionally oversaturated, the last color to survive when everything else has turned gray. The company's canine mascot, the Red Rocket Pup, was originally going to appear as a plush toy line, but the idea was scrapped late in development. A few of those prototypes still appear hidden in workshop menus, buried as Easter eggs for modders to find. The gas pumps themselves are labeled Fusion Fuel Only, a small reminder that even before the war, humanity had already outgrown the Earth's resources. Bethesda's environmental storytelling often relies on sound as much as sight. If you stand inside the ruins of Boston's Old North Church, where the railroad hides its headquarters, you'll hear a faint echo of hymns mixed into the ambient soundtrack. It's not random. The sound was recorded from real church choirs and layered with low static to make it sound like ghosts singing through the walls. The railroad symbol, the lantern, was chosen to evoke the Underground Railroad of American history. Their mission, saving synths from slavery, mirrors that legacy of compassion beneath tyranny. The soft golden light in their hideout represents the same thing as their cause, fragile but defiant. The Far Harbor expansion took players beyond the Commonwealth to the fog-choked coast of Maine. Its inspiration came from the eerie beauty of northern fishing towns, where fog hides both beauty and fear. Bethesda's artists visited real harbors in Bar Harbor, Maine, recording gulls, creaking wood, and the crash of waves to use as ambient sound. The mysterious radiation fog that defines the island was built using 7 layers of volumetric mist, each reacting dynamically to player movement and flashlight beams. The Children of Adam cult that resides there sees the fog as divine, a holy presence made visible. The entire DLC was designed around one question: can faith survive reason when both are drowned in mist? The Automatron expansion, by contrast, explored humanity's relationship with creation. The Mechanist, its central figure, believes machines can bring peace through perfect logic. Her robot armies, though built with compassion, bring destruction, Instead, a story echoing Fallout's recurring theme of good intentions turned fatal. The sound design of her robots was based on recordings of old printers and dot matrix machines slowed to unnatural speeds. Bethesda's audio director described it as the sound of mercy processed through steel. Fallout 4's crafting system, one of its most beloved features, was born out of a glitch. During early testing, a developer accidentally duplicated a piece of furniture while rotating it in debug mode. The effect looked natural, so the team expanded the idea into modular crafting. Every workshop item has physical weight and volume, meaning your settlements aren't just decorations, they occupy real space. The developers said the system's success came from how it connects creativity to survival. Building walls doesn't just protect you from raiders, it protects your sanity in a world where control is rare. The Wasteland's flora carries quiet history too. Hub flowers, glowing blue plants used in chems, were modeled after morning glories. Bloodleaf, used to craft stim packs, draws inspiration from red algae. The developers used real botanical growth algorithms to make them respawn naturally after in-game weeks, symbolizing renewal. Even the smallest patch of green in Fallout represents defiance nature, reclaiming what humanity abandoned. The soundtrack to Fallout 4, again composed by Inon Zur, weaves melancholy and grandeur together. The main theme uses the same four-note motif as Fallout 3, but slowed by half, like a memory remembered in a dream. Zur recorded parts of the score using an 8-foot grand piano with its strings slightly detuned, creating an imperfect resonance meant to echo through vast empty spaces. He described it as music played by ghosts for ghosts. Even the small collectibles of Fallout 4 have deep roots. The Vault-Tec bobbleheads scattered throughout the world are more than Easter eggs. They represent humanity's need to turn even catastrophe into a game. The bobblehead design dates back to Fallout 2, but in this game, they serve as tiny anchors of hope. Each one stands on a cheerful Vault-Tec base, with the phrase, "The future is bright," engraved in microscopic letters. The developers added that detail knowing almost no one would ever notice it, but they wanted the world to feel cared for, even in its smallest corners. At its heart, Fallout 4 is a story about memory of people, places, and ideals. The sole survivor's journey through the Commonwealth is more than revenge or reconstruction. It's the slow rediscovery of connection. Whether you side with the Institute, the Brotherhood, the Minutemen, or the Railroad, every choice reflects a truth about humanity, that survival means nothing without purpose. Bethesda's writers intentionally gave no perfect ending. The Wasteland doesn't need one. It only needs to keep breathing the same way the player does, step by step, through quiet roads and shattered homes, chasing the faint light that still flickers somewhere beyond the fog. Fallout 4's Commonwealth feels alive because it was built as more than a map. It was built as memory. Every broken bridge, every rusted car, every skeletal tree was positioned with deliberate intent. The development team used historical maps of Boston from before the Great War, then aged them century by century, layering destruction like sediment. They wanted players to feel like explorers, not adventurers, people walking through the remains of a story that never truly ended. Even the fog density shifts across regions, growing thicker near rivers and industrial zones to create the illusion that pollution still lingers, centuries after the last factory closed its doors. The city of Boston within Fallout 4 was constructed with one of the densest environments Bethesda had ever built. The designers filled it with more vertical detail than any previous Fallout title, stacking ruins and rooftops to create a skyline that feels claustrophobic yet alive. It's why you can hear faint echoes of gunfire miles away or see distant flashes of light reflecting off broken glass. Those were not random ambient effects. They were synchronized to invisible world events happening beyond the player's view, reminding you that the wasteland never truly sleeps. One of the most overlooked buildings in the Commonwealth is the Cabot House, a place that bridges the supernatural and the scientific. Inside lives the Cabot family, kept alive for centuries through an alien artifact. This storyline was inspired by early pulp adventure novels and the myth of the Philosopher's Stone eternal life achieved through forbidden knowledge. The glowing serum used by the family was designed to resemble liquefied amber, meant to feel both medicinal and ancient. The development team used warm, golden lighting throughout the mansion to emphasize temptation immortality as comfort rather than curse. The creature that guards the artifact beneath the Cabot House, known as Lorenzo, is one of the rare examples of Fallout venturing into Lovecraftian horror. His voice was recorded through a metal pipe to give it the warped resonance of someone speaking from inside a tomb. The choice to keep his powers vague, psychic, alien, or scientific was intentional. Fallout's world often leaves questions unanswered because ambiguity itself becomes part of its myth. Even the companions' smallest details tell stories of their own. Kate's accent and backstory were inspired by real accounts of addiction and underground fighting in post-industrial Europe. Her personal quest, involving a cure for her chem dependency, was written to humanize her without romanticizing her pain. Her voice actress, Katie Townsend, recorded the same lines multiple ways, some filled with aggression, others trembling with vulnerability, allowing the game to subtly change her tone depending on your dialogue choices. Her story arc symbolizes what Fallout always tries to say. Redemption in a ruined world is never perfect, but it's always possible. Curie's transformation from robot to synth represents the intersection of compassion and technology. When she becomes human, she experiences emotions for the first time, and her fascination with them mirrors humanity rediscovering itself after the bombs. The moment she says she feels love for the first time was one of the few scenes in the game that made multiple developers cry during recording. Her new voice, slightly softer and slower than before, was deliberately pitched to sound like someone learning how to breathe. In contrast, Paladin Dance's story unfolds as a tragedy of identity. Discovering he is a synth within the Brotherhood of Steel, the very organization that hunts them, he embodies Fallout's exploration of prejudice and self-acceptance. His voice acting was directed to move from military precision to emotional hesitation after the reveal. Even his armor changes subtly, the once pristine metal gaining scratches and dents after his exile. Bethesda called his arc the breaking of steel, both literally and symbolically. Deacon, the railroad agent known for his disguises, was built around the theme of unreliable narration. Nearly every story he tells about his past contradicts another, leaving players unsure which, if any, are true. The developers wrote more than 20 versions of his supposed history and recorded them all, ensuring no two players would experience the exact same impression of him. His purpose was to reflect Fallout's core uncertainty that truth in the wasteland is as fragile as trust itself. Fallout 4's radio hosts add a layer of warmth to the coldness of the wasteland. Travis from Diamond City grows from anxious to confident. Red Eye from Nuka World mocks both raiders and tourists alike. And the mysterious DJ in Far Harbor's fog was recorded with static intentionally baked into his lines, symbolizing voices lost in the storm. These characters are not just background noise, they are humanity's heartbeat in the silence, proof that people still need connection, even when their only audience is the wind. The Institute's design philosophy, pristine and symmetrical, intentionally clashes with the chaos above. The white walls, the gentle hum of machinery, the slow pulse of sterile light, it's all built to feel utopian, yet deeply wrong. The developers referenced modern tech campuses and minimalist architecture, but stripped them of warmth. Everything is perfect, but nothing is human. The synths who walk those halls mimic life so precisely that it becomes uncanny. You can almost forget they are not breathing, and that's the point. Fallout's greatest horror isn't destruction, it's perfection achieved without empathy. Even the terminals scattered across the Commonwealth tell small stories of decline. Some show simple logs of office workers gossiping about promotions. Others record experiments that slowly drift into madness. Many end mid-sentence, as if interrupted by sirens or the blinding flash of nuclear fire. Bethesda's writers referred to these as digital fossils. They wanted players to stumble across tragedy through paperwork, not cutscenes, a quiet archaeology of despair. The design of the feral ghouls in Fallout 4 took inspiration from both medical photography and classic zombie cinema. Their skin was modeled after melted wax to suggest the slow collapse of tissue under radiation. Their erratic movements were captured through motion sensors worn by stunt actors who moved in unpredictable, twitching rhythms. The eerie screeching sound they make came from mixing recordings of hyenas, metal friction, and human whispers. The result is a creature that feels both human and utterly alien, a body that forgot it was alive. The Deathclaws, among Fallout's most iconic monsters, were redesigned to appear even more menacing in the Commonwealth. Their scales glisten with an oily sheen meant to catch sunlight like armor. Their roars were composed from tiger growls, elephant bellows, and wind tunnel recordings blended together. In lore, these beasts trace their origin to pre-war genetic experimentation, symbols of mankind's arrogance in reshaping nature. Every time one charges through the fog, it is not just a battle, it is evolution itself, demanding respect. One of the game's smallest but most touching details lies in the Museum of Freedom in Concord, where you first meet the Minutemen. Inside, if you listen carefully, you can hear faint patriotic music echoing through the halls, slightly distorted by broken speakers. The team wanted that moment to feel like a ceremony that never ended, a celebration continuing centuries past its purpose. When the raiders attack, their gunfire blends into the drums of the music, creating a haunting dissonance between past and present. The Commonwealth's children's toys, like the Jangles the Moon Monkey doll, serve as symbols of innocence lost. Jangles was given a personality through his name and repeated appearances often found near cribs, playgrounds, or science labs. The developers used him as a recurring motif for humanity's inability to let go of joy, even when the world turned to ash. The squeak he makes when dropped was recorded using an actual vintage toy from the 1940s. Radiation in Fallout 4 is not just a mechanic, it's an atmosphere. The soft ticking of a Geiger counter in your Pip-Boy increases near certain ruins, subtly influencing your behavior even before the danger becomes visible. The developers carefully tuned the sound to increase anxiety without breaking immersion. In the glowing sea, the sound becomes almost musical, the steady rhythm of decay, a reminder that the planet itself is still alive, but no longer safe to touch. Many of the game's quest lines are named with poetic intention. The molecular level describes both the literal act of teleportation and the metaphorical idea of breaking yourself apart to reach truth. Reunions is not just about finding someone, but confronting what remains when reunion is impossible. The nuclear option, the final quest, embodies Fallout's cruelest irony that after centuries of ruin, humanity's solution to conflict is still destruction. The writing team wanted every quest title to echo beyond its mission, lingering like the aftertaste of memory. Bethesda's environmental team hid countless unmarked stories throughout the Commonwealth. A skeleton in a bathtub holding a bottle of wine near an empty glass. A pair of lovers turned to ash, still embracing beneath a collapsed highway. A soldier's uniform folded neatly beside an unlit cigarette. None of these moments are explained. They don't need to be. The team called them postcards from extinction, small gestures that prove tragedy can be quiet, even kind. Fallout 4's color tone at sunset was chosen to resemble rusted gold, not bright, not warm, but fading. The sky during those hours was painted to symbolize hope, lingering after disaster. If you stand atop the ruins of Trinity Tower, as the sun sinks, the horizon glows in soft orange light, reflecting off broken glass and twisted metal. The developers called this the Hour of Mercy. It's when the world looks its gentlest, even if nothing has changed. The game's weather system cycles through more than a dozen conditions, from misty drizzle to violent radiation storms. Each one affects the way sound travels. Rain softens footsteps, fog muffles, gunfire, and thunder causes dialogue to echo faintly. These small sensory details were meant to create immersion through empathy. The player doesn't just see the wasteland, they feel it breathing. In the end, Fallout 4's Commonwealth is less about surviving destruction and more about rediscovering meaning. The rusted streets, the cracked highways, the empty diners, they're not monuments to failure. They're reminders that even in ruin, the world keeps telling stories. Every raindrop on metal, every flicker of neon, every heartbeat beneath power armor, all of it whispers the same truth. Humanity endures, not because it must, but because it cannot stop trying. Fallout 4's world feels alive, not because of constant movement, but because of its quiet persistence. The Commonwealth is a breathing organism made of rust, dust, and memory. The game's designers built entire stories into the smallest details: a flickering light in a basement, a radio still tuned to static, or the way ivy slowly overtakes brick walls. These moments are easy to overlook when rushing through missions, but when you stop and listen, you realize that Fallout's most powerful storytelling doesn't come from dialogue, it comes from silence. The wreck of the USS Constitution stands as one of the most beloved examples of Fallout's humor and hope. Its robot crew, still convinced they're sailing the ocean, live by rules centuries outdated, yet perfectly followed. When you help them launch their ship, its engines scream and spark, rising clumsily into the air before smashing into another building. That absurd moment captures everything Fallout stands for: faith, failure, and persistence. The Constitution still sails, even if it crashes, because believing in impossible things is what keeps the wasteland alive. Another ship, the Yangtze submarine, rests quietly beneath the harbor. Its commander, Captain Zhao, is one of the last living soldiers from before the Great War. His dialogue is written with melancholy restraint, reflecting guilt over the destruction his nation helped cause. The eerie sonar pings echoing through the submarine were recorded from real naval archives, layered with the faint hum of underwater turbines. Zhao's story, hidden away under the waves, mirrors the world above, men who wanted peace but built weapons instead. In the heart of the glowing sea, far from civilization, sits the crater of Adam, a settlement of people who worship radiation itself. The children of Adam view the bomb's fire as divine revelation. Their chants echo through the toxic air, calm and reverent. Bethesda wanted them to feel both fanatical and peaceful, a religion born from catastrophe, yet devoted to transcendence. Their glowing eyes and illuminated robes symbolize faith illuminated by destruction, light shining from the end of everything. Far to the north, the forgotten town of Salem houses a museum filled with mannequins dressed as witches. The Witch Museum is one of Fallout 4's strangest locations, blending history with horror. Its dusty exhibits tell the story of superstition long before the bombs, but when you reach the basement, a Deathclaw waits in the shadows. It's a cruel joke of design. The monster the world once imagined finally became real. Bethesda used this moment as commentary on fear itself. Humanity creates its demons, then meets them. The Institute's creation of synths changed the tone of Fallout's entire universe. These beings, indistinguishable from humans, blur the line between biology and machine. Bethesda designed their skin using multiple layers of transparency to replicate the way light passes through real flesh. Their eyes, glowing faintly under the surface, were inspired by medical prosthetics used for burn victims. The developers wanted players to question what makes something human. Is it blood, memory, or empathy? The Institute believes it's none of those things. That's why their world feels sterile, a paradise without souls. In contrast, the Railroad exists as humanity's last heartbeat of compassion. Its members risk everything to free synths from slavery. The coded word you use to enter their base, Railroad, spelled through lanterns, was inspired by underground abolitionist signals used in the 19th century. Each companion associated with the Railroad represents a different form of rebellion: Deacon's lies, Tinker Tom's madness, and Glory's sacrifice. Even their hideout feels symbolic beneath a church, faith layered under secrecy. The Brotherhood of Steel's arrival in the Commonwealth is heralded by the sound of vertibirds roaring across the sky. That moment, when you first look up to see their ships silhouetted against the clouds, was designed to instill awe. The team recorded real helicopter engines, then slowed the sound to half speed, giving it a deeper, thunderous quality. The Brotherhood's ideology preservation through control is reflected in every aspect of their design. Their steel uniforms, rigid ranks, and devotion to hierarchy form a religion of order, worshiping technology as divine truth. Elder Maxon's speeches aboard the Prydwen are delivered with almost biblical intensity. His voice carries across the metal hangar, echoing among soldiers who stand in perfect formation. The writers wanted his dialogue to sound noble and frightening, at the same time a young man convinced that he alone understands destiny. The title Elder isn't ironic, it's tragic. He's wise only in the way zealots are certain of everything, blind to anything else. One of Fallout 4's most beloved characters, Preston Garvey, became infamous for his endless requests to defend settlements. The repetition wasn't just a programming loop, it was a reflection of the Minutemen's philosophy, vigilance without rest. Every new settlement represents hope, but also the impossibility of maintaining peace forever. Bethesda intentionally made the notifications frequent because the game's world mirrors life itself. There is always another fire to put out, another neighbor in need, another cause worth fighting for. The Minutemen flag, featuring a simple star and musket, is more than decoration. It's designed to look like an inverted version of the pre-war American flag. Fewer stars, faded colors, frayed edges. This symbol represents a world that remembers what unity looked like, but can't quite recreate it. The phrase General of the Minutemen carries weight not because it grants power, but because it grants responsibility. Fallout's peace is never comfortable, it's built on constant work. Some of the most subtle design details in Fallout 4 exist in its abandoned homes. Children's drawings on walls, faded advertisements for vacations that never happened, and calendars frozen on the date of the war all serve as emotional fossils. The animators intentionally placed dust particles floating in sunbeams to create the illusion of suspended time. When you enter these homes, the music fades and ambient noise takes over. It's as if the game itself pauses in mourning. The Vault-Tec headquarters in downtown Boston remains one of the game's darkest locations. Its terminals reveal the truth behind the company's experiments human lives treated as data. The pristine blue and yellow Vault-Tec logo stands out against crumbling walls, a cruel reminder that optimism can be weaponized. In one office, a skeleton slumps beside a briefcase filled with unpaid invoices, as if even Apocalypse couldn't interrupt bureaucracy. Fallout's humor often hides in such details, not to make light of tragedy, but to expose how absurd normal life already was before the bombs. The crafting system, introduced in Fallout 4, gave players control over survival in a way that previous games hadn't. Every pipe, circuit, and screw matters. The act of scrapping junk into materials became a metaphor for humanity's resilience, taking the useless and making it vital again. Bethesda called it alchemy through memory, turning trash into tools. The clang of metal when you dismantle an object is the sound of rebirth. Settlements like Starlight Drive-In or the castle become reflections of the player's personality. Some build sprawling cities of light, others craft quiet havens of solitude. Bethesda wanted players to feel like archaeologists and artists simultaneously shaping civilization from bones. That's why each settlement has unique terrain and weather patterns. The castle, with its storm-beaten walls, carries the echo of the Minutemen's downfall. The drive-in, with its glowing screen, feels like nostalgia reborn. In a world that forgot cinema, you get to make your own. The character creation system, one of Fallout 4's earliest revealed features, used facial scanning technology to allow players to sculpt faces like clay. The developers wanted the opening scene, a family getting ready for their day, to feel domestic and human before tragedy struck. The mirrored character creation screen wasn't just a clever interface trick, it was symbolic. You look at your reflection, shaping yourself, moments before losing everything. Inonzur's music during that prologue uses a soft piano progression built on descending notes, a melody that always falls, never rises. It mirrors the emotional descent from normal life into nuclear nightmare. That same motif appears subtly throughout the game, often hidden within ambient tracks. It's the musical version of memory, a tune that keeps haunting the edges of your mind. Vault 111's design follows strict geometry-concentric circles and repeating arcs. The developers based it on real Cold War bunker schematics, but exaggerated proportions to make the vault feel like a machine for sleeping souls. Even the cryogenic pods are arranged in the shape of an atom's orbit. When you awaken, that orbit has broken your world's nucleus gone. The light that floods the chamber was calibrated to mimic sunrise, so that when you step outside, the apocalypse feels strangely familiar. Fallout's beauty lies in contrast. It's a game where hope grows from rust, where laughter survives alongside ruin, and where a world built on lies still finds truth in fragments. Every flickering light bulb, every old billboard, every quiet melody on the radio reminds you that the apocalypse didn't erase humanity, it simply revealed it. And in the Commonwealth's quiet nights, beneath green skies and silver stars, you can still hear it breathing tired, broken, but impossibly alive. When night falls across the Commonwealth, the wasteland becomes a painting of quiet light and shadow. The glow of neon from old signs flickers across cracked asphalt, while distant gunfire fades into the soft hum of insects. Fallout 4's world feels different in darkness, not just visually, but emotionally. The lighting engine was tuned so that every lamp, every burning barrel, and every flickering bulb casts warmth in contrast to the cold world around it. Bethesda's designers wanted players to feel comfort in artificial light, to make every small glow a symbol of defiance against oblivion. Diamond City at night is a collage of soft gold and green. Steam rises from vents near the market, casting faint halos around lanterns. The soundscape shifts to voices lower, radios hum quietly, and you can hear vendors locking up stalls with metallic clicks. Bethesda recorded those sounds in an actual open-air market after dark, capturing the rhythm of routine after chaos. That's the secret of Fallout's calm. It finds peace not by avoiding ruin, but by living gently within it. The characters who inhabit Diamond City each carry traces of a life that could have been. Arturo, the weapons dealer, keeps a faded photograph of his father behind the counter. Mo Cronin, the baseball bat merchant, sells authentic bats based on a complete misunderstanding of the sport, proudly insisting they were once used for warfare. The writers created Mo as a living example of cultural drift, a man trying to preserve history he doesn't fully understand. It's funny, but also deeply human. Fallout's humor often hides its sorrow in laughter, like someone smiling through a scar. Takashi, the robotic noodle vendor, was one of the most challenging characters to program. He uses a repurposed Protectron frame with new animations that allow him to serve food realistically. The developers recorded real sizzling sounds of noodles frying to make his stand feel alive. Takashi only repeats a few simple phrases, yet somehow feels warm and familiar. Bethesda once described him as a machine that accidentally became a friend. Outside the city walls, the wasteland's dangers become strangely beautiful. The glowing sea stretches endlessly, bathed in light that should mean death, but instead feels holy. Inon Zur composed a specific theme for that region, using low cello drones and reversed piano chords to create an otherworldly hum. When you walk through that irradiated silence, you hear something like a hymn the earth itself singing through its wounds. Fallout has always treated radiation as both punishment and poetry. The glowing sea's centerpiece, the Virgil Cave, tells a quiet story of guilt and transformation. Virgil, a former Institute scientist, hides there in exile, mutated yet still human in spirit. His laboratory is filled with items from his past life, neatly stacked notes, sterile equipment, and a single microscope facing a rock wall as though he can't stop looking for answers. Bethesda's team wanted players to feel pity, not fear. Virgil's quest for a cure isn't about vanity, it's about penance. Far Harbor, with its endless fog, expands on that same theme of blurred morality. Its landscapes are layered with mist that reacts dynamically to flashlight beams, giving the impression that the world breathes around you. The fog isn't just weather, it's a presence. It hides monsters, memories, and meaning. The residents of the island, paranoid and divided, embody Fallout's greatest truth. When the world ends, ideology becomes a mirror. The children of Adam pray to the glow, the townspeople fear it, the synths simply endure it. Every side is right, and every side is wrong. In Far Harbor, the player meets Kasumi Nakano, a girl who believes she might be a synth. Her story captures Fallout's core question: what defines identity when memory itself can be copied? Her bedroom at the Nakano residence contains small details that reveal her humanity: hand-built electronics, a tiny radio, and a note addressed to her parents she never sent. Bethesda filled her story with quiet tragedy rather than drama. When you find her, the answer to her question doesn't matter. The journey towards self-understanding is what makes her real. The fog soundscape in Far Harbor was recorded by layering white noise with slowed ocean waves and faint heartbeats. The result is something that sounds like breathing soft, endless, inhuman. The developers wanted players to feel both comforted and unsettled, as though nature itself were whispering secrets through static. That's why, even in the DLC's darkest corners, the game never feels cruel. Fallout's terror is always gentle, the kind that lingers rather than strikes. The Nuka World expansion shifts tone completely, offering color and chaos in place of gloom. Its theme park design was inspired by real amusement parks, including Disney World and Coney Island, but filtered through the lens of decay. Every ride, every mascot, every cheerful jingle becomes eerie when stripped of context. The main theme song for Nuka World was recorded using a real barbershop quartet, singing in deliberately out-of-tune harmony to make happiness sound slightly wrong. Bethesda called it the sound of joy with a cracked smile. Within Nuka World, the various gang factions reflect different forms of freedom gone feral. The operators embody greed, the disciples embrace cruelty, and the pack represents chaos without purpose. Their designs mirror their philosophies. The operators wear tailored suits and jewelry looted from the pre-war elite, while the pack dresses in animal bones and bright paint, turning savagery into spectacle. The disciples cover their armor in blades, a statement that pain itself can be decoration. The raiders of Nuka World are grotesque, but like everything in Fallout, they're just reflections of humanity without restraint. The Nuka-Cola brand serves as Fallout's greatest symbol of lost innocence. Its glowing bottles, its cheerful mascot, its relentless optimism all represent a world that believed happiness could be mass-produced. In lore, Nuka-Cola's creator, John Caleb Bradburton, still lives, or rather, his preserved head does trapped in a secret chamber beneath the park. His immortality machine was built to preserve genius, but ended up preserving regret. The glowing blue liquid, known as Nuka-Cola Quantum, was created using a radioactive isotope that made the beverage both lethal and beautiful. Bethesda designed the glow using layered particle effects, so it looked liquid, yet luminescent, a drinkable star. One of the most overlooked details in Fallout 4 is the use of children's music boxes scattered throughout the game. Their soft melodies echo faintly in certain homes, looping endlessly in the dark. These sounds are meant to represent memories stuck on repeat, the innocence of the past that refuses to stop playing even after the world ends. The notes are slightly off-key to create unease, a lullaby sung by ghosts. Another subtle design choice is how Fallout 4 handles time. Days last roughly 48 in-game minutes, but the lighting shifts gradually enough that it feels natural. Sunsets fade slowly, stars appear one by one, and mornings begin with mist rising off the Charles River. The developers studied the way light reflects through real New England haze to capture authenticity. Every hour feels earned. Bethesda called this system temporal storytelling because time itself becomes the narrator, each sunrise another page in a world without authors. The crafting of chems in Fallout is one of its darker reflections on human creativity. Jet, a drug made from Brahmin waste, was invented in the pre-war days by a desperate chemist who wanted to feel alive. Psycho, Buffout, and Mentats all carry subtle satire stimulants designed for soldiers, bodybuilders, and businessmen respectively. Bethesda reimagined each with unique colors, shapes, and bottle designs inspired by mid-century pharmaceuticals. Even in addiction, Fallout's world keeps its charm. One of the game's most mysterious Easter eggs lies deep within the ocean floor off the eastern coast. If you dive far enough, you can find the remains of what appears to be a massive, tentacled skeleton. The developers never explained it, though fans speculate it connects to the Dunwich mythos. The music in that area shifts to low rumbles and distorted whale calls, creating the illusion that the sea itself watches you. Fallout's mysteries work because they never demand answers. They let curiosity become comfort. The mirelurks that patrol the coastal waters were modeled after horseshoe crabs and deep-sea insects. Their shells glisten under light, coated in a wet texture layer that makes them look perpetually damp. The glowing mirelurk queens, towering and fearsome, were added to create the sense that even nature has queens, now mutated monarchs, ruling over ruin. The hiss they make before charging was recorded from a mix of gator bellows and boiling water. It sounds both organic and mechanical, like evolution improvising. Radiation storms, one of the game's most atmospheric phenomena, were designed around a simple principle: beauty born from danger. The sky turns emerald, lightning flashes in slow rhythm, and the wind carries whispers of voices, an illusion created by layering reversed human speech into the ambient track. These storms only last a few minutes, but they feel eternal. Bethesda wanted them to represent memory, cleansing itself, the world trying to begin again even through poison. In the quiet between battles, Fallout 4's music drifts like a lullaby. Inon Zur often writes in minor keys, using unresolved chords to create tension that never fully fades. That's why the soundtrack feels both soothing and sad. He described it as the sound of a civilization humming in its sleep. Each piece of music mirrors a human emotion: solitude, curiosity, nostalgia, grief, all woven into the background so subtly that you barely notice when it ends. The Commonwealth, with all its chaos and contradictions, never truly feels hopeless. Every settlement you build, every friend you make, every story you uncover adds warmth back into the wasteland. Fallout's beauty doesn't come from perfection, it comes from persistence. The grass growing through cracks, the laughter echoing in ruins, the glowing bottle on a dark table, these are the miracles the game wants you to see. They remind you that no matter how many centuries pass, humanity never stops reaching for light, even in the shadows. The sound of wind in Fallout 4 is as carefully built as its world. Bethesda's audio engineers recorded hours of real wind across the forests of Maryland, layering it with low bass hums that shift in pitch as you move between open plains and city streets. When the player climbs to higher ground, the wind gains a subtle whistle to evoke altitude. At night, it softens, replaced by faint rustling, the world's lullaby. The studio once called this nature's voice through static. Fallout's silence isn't empty, it's orchestral. Inon Zur composed each region's music with a different emotional key. Urban Boston uses strings and horns, echoing grandeur lost to decay. The suburbs use woodwinds and piano, light yet nostalgic. The coastal zones use echoing percussion, resembling waves against forgotten piers. Zur said his goal wasn't to create background music, but to write soundtracks for loneliness. And that's why, even after hundreds of hours, the score never feels intrusive. It's part of the landscape itself, a ghost that hums when you breathe. The game's introduction, set in pre-war Boston, was designed to feel too perfect. The clean streets, smiling neighbors, and gentle music all mask the coming catastrophe. Every object in the player's house, from the laundry detergent to the baby's crib mobile, was researched from mid-century catalogs. Bethesda wanted players to experience nostalgia for a time they never lived in. The robot salesman at the door, Mr. Russell, embodies that same eerie normalcy, corporate cheerfulness seconds before apocalypse. Fallout's irony begins there, in the warmth of denial. When the bombs fall, the flash on the horizon was animated using 3 layers of light: the initial white burst, a yellow expansion, and a fading orange glow. The developers studied historical footage from nuclear tests to mimic the double pulse effect, where the shockwave lags slightly behind the flash. Even the player's hair and furniture sway gently from invisible pressure. It lasts only seconds, but that moment, the last normal breath of the old world, defines everything that follows. The vaults scattered throughout the Commonwealth each tell their own kind of horror story. Vault 75, hidden beneath Malden Middle School, was designed as a genetic refinement project where children were taken from families and raised as test subjects. The environment tells the story through contrast bright, cheerful classroom posters above rusted surgical tables. Vault 81, on the other hand, hides a medical experiment beneath a functioning community. The developers built this vault to show that not every experiment ended in cruelty. Some were misguided attempts at good. Its friendly residents and curious children represent the other side of Vault-Tech's ambition: control disguised as kindness. Vault 88, added in later content, lets players become the overseer. It's both fantasy and critique, a chance to rebuild while confronting what power does to people. Bethesda based its unfinished structure on real subterranean blueprints of Cold War shelters never completed. The echoing halls, the flicker of fluorescent lights, and the constant hum of machinery were all meant to evoke the feeling of living inside progress that never finished. It's Fallout's great irony again: creation forever interrupted. The game's weather engine was one of the studio's most ambitious systems. It simulates cloud movement, wind direction, and sunlight diffusion across dozens of zones simultaneously. During radiation storms, small particle effects swirl to mimic irradiated dust, and lightning strikes generate temporary shadows across the landscape. The developers programmed the storms to pass faster over cities, symbolizing how destruction and civilization still dance together. When the thunder rolls through, it doesn't frighten, it comforts, like the voice of a world still alive. The Pip-Boy, perhaps Fallout's most recognizable tool, evolved into its most tangible version in Fallout 4. For the first time, Bethesda built a real-life replica to fit around players' wrists in the special edition release. Inside the game, the Pip-Boy's glow changes subtly depending on your surroundings, brightening in darkness, dimming near light. Its screen flicker was modeled after vacuum tube monitors from the 1950s down to the slight distortion at the edges. The developers said they wanted it to feel alive, like it's breathing with you. It hums when you stand still because it doesn't trust silence. One of the Commonwealth's most overlooked landmarks is the Museum of Witchcraft. On paper, it's just another ruin, but the interior atmosphere transforms it into something primal. Creaking wood, whispering wind, and the faint scent of dust and fear fill the air. The entire building's sound design uses subtle detuned string instruments layered beneath ambient noise, creating subconscious unease. When you finally meet the creature lurking inside a deathclaw, nesting among bones, the encounter feels mythic. Fallout rarely uses horror jump scares. It builds dread through reverence. The city's shadowed ruins, from Trinity Tower to the Old North Church, were all modeled with real-world precision. Trinity Tower, where you meet the trapped super mutant named Strong, mirrors Boston's real skyscraper of the same name, with elevators that once touched the clouds. Strong's obsession with Shakespeare's milk of human kindness was chosen deliberately. The line represents compassion in the midst of brutality. Bethesda's writers used it to show that even monsters in Fallout long for humanity. The Old North Church, home to the railroad, uses real Boston architecture. Its tunnels twist beneath history, each lantern symbolizing light under oppression. Bethesda recorded real footsteps in brick corridors to capture authentic echoes. The scene where the player deciphers the password Freedom Trail was inspired by real tourist routes in Boston that follow Revolutionary War landmarks. That blend of patriotism and secrecy makes the railroad's mission feel timeless rebellion dressed in reverence. The Commonwealth's wildlife is just as symbolic as its cities. The Rodstags, graceful yet unnatural, were animated to move with a combination of elegance and dissonance. One head lifts, while the other lags behind. Their double anatomy represents mutation not as chaos, but as persistence. The bloatflies, grotesque but harmless, were designed to evoke sympathy rather than disgust. Their buzzing slows near the player to mimic curiosity. Even the blood-smeared Mullerats were animated using data from real mole and rodent studies, capturing the desperate urgency of creatures trying to survive extinction. The human enemies in Fallout 4 are just as layered. Raiders speak in fragments of the old world's language, shouting phrases about credit cards and boardrooms without understanding them. Bethesda included these lines as remnants of pre-war memory passed through generations. The Gunners, mercenaries dressed in military gear, represent the survival of structure without soul order detached from ethics. Their camps are arranged in perfect geometry, showing how even in apocalypse, humanity clings to hierarchy. When you visit Goodneighbor, the music changes. Jazz fills the air, low and weary. The city's heart beats with rebellion and style a haven for those who refuse to live by anyone's rules. Its mayor, Hancock, embodies the spirit of defiant decay. His ghoul form is a metaphor for self-acceptance, his white-painted face a performance of freedom. The developers described him as death-wearing confidence. The neon lights around Goodneighbor pulse faintly with rhythm synced to the jazz tempo, creating a feeling that the city itself dances to its own broken tune. Nick Valentine, often found wandering near Goodneighbor or in his detective office, remains the most human character in Fallout 4 precisely because he isn't human. His memories, borrowed from another man, make him a patchwork of personality and empathy. The slight static in his voice comes from layers of modulation recorded through old microphones to sound like an aging tape. His eyes, glowing amber beneath the shadows of his hat, symbolize memory that never fades. Nick's story, helping others even while questioning his own identity, encapsulates the essence of Fallout, humanity surviving through imitation until it becomes real again. Diamond City's radio host, Travis Miles, may seem comic at first, but his story is one of courage found in awkwardness. His quest line, where the player helps him build confidence, mirrors the game's theme of quiet rebirth. Bethesda instructed the actor to stutter and pause intentionally to make every sentence feel genuine rather than scripted. The shift in his tone later, once he believes in himself, marks one of Fallout 4's few pure moments of joy. In a world filled with ruins, hearing Travis laugh on air is a kind of victory. The ambient sounds of the wasteland were built to mimic loneliness without despair. Distant thunder, faint coyote howls, and the echo of gunfire all fade according to geography. In wide open spaces, sounds stretch like elastic. In ruins, they die quickly. The developers called it audio decay, matching sound to the theme of entropy. When rain begins to fall, the percussion shifts slightly to blend with footsteps, turning every walk into a soft melody. Fallout's environment isn't just seen, it's felt through rhythm. Even the smallest places hold quiet meaning. A diner called Drumlin Diner, perched beside a cracked highway, hosts a standoff between a trader and a scavenger. It's a simple encounter, easy to miss, but it represents Fallout's moral heart. Conflict born from scarcity, choices made between right and survival. The team built it early in development to test emotional tension, and it became a benchmark for the game's realism. No grand speeches, no villains, just hunger and hope colliding in the dust. The Commonwealth's roads tell their own stories. The cracked lines of faded paint, the skeletal remains of cars, and the overgrown vines creeping across concrete all create a kind of accidental poetry. Bethesda referred to the art direction as past tense beauty. Every ruin, no matter how tragic, still carries grace. The setting sun catching on glass shards, the wind lifting ash like petals. These are the quiet miracles of Fallout, the reminder that the world, even broken, never stopped trying to be beautiful. Fallout 4's genius lies not in its battles or its choices, but in its tenderness. The tenderness of Codsworth polishing a floor that no longer matters. The tenderness of a player placing a chair beside a fire in their settlement just to sit and watch the rain. The tenderness of silence after chaos. The game whispers through its details that survival isn't loud, it's gentle. Every small act of rebuilding is an act of love, and love, in Fallout, is the rarest resource of all. The Commonwealth's ruins aren't just set dressing, they're relics of a world that once believed it could never end. The buildings that lean against each other like tired giants, the hollowed trains frozen on cracked tracks, and the soft hum of pre-war lights that somehow still flicker after 2 centuries. All of it was placed to remind players that humanity's fingerprints don't fade, even when humanity does. Bethesda's world artists referred to this aesthetic as beautiful corrosion. Every shattered window reflects light differently. Every exposed rebar casts a shadow like veins through a dying body. The Commonwealth isn't dead, it's simply waiting. The designers studied the real geography of Boston to give Fallout 4 a sense of truth beneath fiction. The Massachusetts State House dome still gleams faintly under radioactive dust. The Paul Revere Monument stands silent, untouched by scavengers, as though reverence itself protects it. Even the Charles River Bridge still stretches across the water, fractured yet unfallen, a metaphor for connection after disaster. Bethesda's environmental team wanted the player to feel like an archaeologist walking through a dream that almost remembers its name. The Boston Public Library, one of the most atmospheric interiors in the game, was built from digital scans of actual architecture. Its shelves are filled with ruined books, and yet, through one small quest, the player can trade those volumes for tokens that preserve them. The idea was to reward curiosity and respect for history. The developers even added faint dust motes that swirl differently depending on whether the player runs or walks, creating the illusion that each movement stirs forgotten knowledge. It's one of Fallout's most poetic spaces, a library that still teaches, even in silence. In contrast, the ruins of Quincy tell a harsher story. Once a thriving Minutemen stronghold, it fell to raiders and mercenaries long before the player's arrival. Bethesda used its layout to symbolize betrayal: narrow alleys, broken walls, and watchtowers turned inward instead of out. The ambient track playing there uses slowed heartbeat sounds buried beneath the music, a reminder that the city itself remembers pain. When the player retakes Quincy later in the Minutemen questline, the tone subtly changes, the same melody played in a major key instead of minor. Redemption in Fallout is often a matter of tone. The Brotherhood's airship, the Prydwen, was modeled to feel simultaneously ancient and futuristic, riveted like a World War II Zeppelin, yet powered by fusion. The ship's interior hum is one continuous sound that changes subtly as you move between decks, creating the illusion of air circulation and life. Its name, drawn from Welsh legend, means fair face, a poetic irony since it casts a shadow of steel across a broken world. When you stand on its observation deck, watching the city beneath, you see both hope and hubris suspended in the same sky. The dialogue aboard the Prydwen often blends reverence with dread. Soldiers speak of glory with devotion that borders on faith. Bethesda wanted that duality, an army so disciplined it becomes tragic. The Brotherhood of Steel doesn't see itself as conquerors, only custodians of purity. It's a reminder that the line between order and obsession is thinner than a cracked visor. The radio stations scattered across the Commonwealth are more than background noise. They are memories disguised as melody. The ink spots, Roy Brown, Nat King Cole, their voices drift like ghosts, offering sweetness in a world gone bitter. Bethesda carefully selected songs with lyrics that accidentally tell Fallout's story. It's All Over But the Crying, Maybe, and Atom Bomb Baby each echo themes of loss and denial. The crackle of the radio, the slight distortion of old vinyl, was preserved intentionally. The studio could have cleaned the audio, but they didn't. The imperfections make the music feel human. The red rocket truck stops that dot the highways were meant to represent optimism turned to dust. Their design borrows from real mid-century Googie architecture, curved signs, neon edges, and chrome that once promised progress. The rocket itself was modeled after Cold War missile prototypes, symbolizing how humanity's dream of flight and fear of annihilation came from the same imagination. The cheerful Red Rocket Pup mascot appears in faded posters and rusted toys, a reminder that even corporate mascots outlive their creators. Every companion in Fallout 4 was designed to reflect a philosophical question. Piper asks what truth costs. Nick asks what identity means. Curie asks what it feels like to be human. Strong asks whether kindness is strength or weakness. Kate asks whether broken things can heal. Hancock asks if freedom can exist without decay. Even Dogmeat's silent, loyal, pure asks the simplest question of all: can love survive the end of the world? The answer, in every bark and wag of his tail, is yes. Dogmeat's animations were based entirely on a real dog named River, who belonged to the game's lead-level designer. River would visit the studio daily, walking between desks as the team captured her behavior and sounds. Her breathing, footsteps, and even the way she tilted her head were recorded and embedded into the game. When River passed away, Bethesda released a quiet tribute, thanking her for reminding them what Fallout was truly about: companionship. One of the most haunting pieces of environmental storytelling appears at the Mass Fusion building. Its glass facade gleams faintly even after 200 years, a relic of the nuclear age's obsession with progress. Inside, skeletons still sit at their desks, coffee cups fossilized beside computers. The hum of reactors echoes through empty hallways, a mechanical heartbeat still pumping for no one. Fallout's designers said they wanted players to feel awe, not horror. The world didn't end screaming, it ended working overtime. The glowing sea remains one of Fallout 4's most surreal landscapes, a cathedral of dust and radiation. Its palette of green and gold was carefully tuned so that beauty and toxicity coexist. The region's ambient soundtrack uses no melody, only layered drones and faint whispers recorded from wind tunnels. Occasionally, if you stand still long enough, you might hear faint choral harmonies, human voices buried in static. The designers never confirmed if this was intentional. Some players believe it's the world remembering itself. The creature variety in Fallout 4 was built not just for challenge, but for metaphor. The glowing ones represent endurance through mutation. The Yaogwai embody nature's vengeance, bears stronger and angrier than before. The Radroaches, small and unkillable, symbolize the persistence of pests, the survival of the unworthy. Even the mole rats, with their blind burrowing habits, serve a purpose. They represent adaptation without understanding. Fallout's ecosystem doesn't judge, it simply evolves. One of the game's most understated moments occurs when you find a skeleton clutching a holotape that plays a simple message: "If anyone hears this, tell my family I tried." There's no quest attached, no reward, no closure. Bethesda placed dozens of such tapes across the Commonwealth: unfinished confessions, diary fragments, love letters that never reach their destination. They serve as echoes of the ordinary, proof that history is built not by heroes, but by voices lost in static. The children in Fallout 4's world are written with quiet realism. They're not naive, they're resilient. They sell food, repair weapons, and argue like adults who have forgotten childhood. The writers wanted to show that innocence adapts. The voice direction for these young characters emphasized natural speech over performance, no exaggeration, no forced wonder. Their presence, small and often overlooked, keeps the world from being truly hopeless. Children in Fallout remind you that even in ruins, someone will inherit the sunrise. The power armor frame that metallic exoskeleton players step into was redesigned to feel weighty yet liberating. The animators filmed themselves moving inside mock suits built from PVC pipes to capture authentic restriction of movement. The sound that plays when the armor seals is a combination of pneumatic hisses, submarine locks, and deep cello reverberations. Bethesda called it the breath of iron. Wearing power armor isn't just about strength, it's about surrendering to machinery, trusting technology the way knights once trusted faith. The Minutemen's philosophy was built around community, but its tragedy lies in repetition. Preston Garvey's endless calls for help became a meme, yet behind that repetition lies meaning. The wasteland never stops needing heroes, and heroes never stop needing purpose. Bethesda intentionally left his missions looping, not as oversight, but as reflection. Rebuilding civilization is never finished. Even when peace is achieved, there's always another settlement waiting somewhere beyond the fog. Fallout 4's attention to subtle motion extends to its wildlife at rest. Brahmins swish their tails idly while grazing, birds land on skeletons without fear, and water ripples respond to raindrops. These details serve no mechanical purpose, yet they make the world feel real. The game breathes in the moments between chaos. It's a design philosophy that says life doesn't end when no one's watching. The ambient whispers of Fallout's world wind through hollow metal, rustling paper. The hum of old circuits aren't random. They're tuned to the same tonal scale as the background music, meaning everything you hear exists in harmony. The wasteland is an instrument, and every step plays a note. In this way, Fallout 4 becomes something more than a game. It becomes a dream that hums to itself a symphony of dust, memory, and endurance. In the end, Fallout 4's Commonwealth is not about the end of the world. It's about what remains when endings lose meaning. A city rebuilt from rubble, a song sung by a cracked radio, a light bulb still burning after 2 centuries. The game teaches, gently and without words, that survival is not resistance, it's remembrance. And somewhere in the quiet between storms, beneath the hum of old machines and the shimmer of atomic skies, the wasteland still whispers. Life goes on. Beneath the shattered skyline of Boston, the world hums softly with memory. Fallout 4's Commonwealth is built not just on concrete and steel, but on stories layered like sediment, decades of laughter, war, and silence pressed into a single ruin. Every collapsed overpass hides a tale. Every skeleton rests mid-thought. Every flickering bulb keeps watch over a dream that no one else remembers. The game's artists once described the Commonwealth as a museum without curators. Everything you see is evidence of a civilization that tried its best and failed beautifully. Even the cars scattered across the wasteland tell silent stories. Each one is modeled after retro-futuristic concepts from the 1950s fins, like aircraft, glass domes for windshields, and chrome so bright it reflects the end of the world back at you. The blue fusion cells under their hoods glow faintly even after 2 centuries, proof that technology outlasts intention. When you shoot one, it doesn't just explode, it blossoms. The mushroom plume that follows is smaller than a nuclear blast, but it carries the same visual poetry, progress bursting into ruin. The advertisements that line the walls of subway tunnels were designed to age like ghosts. Sugar bombs, Abraxo cleaner, blast radius board game, cheerful reminders of a consumer paradise that believed fun and fear could coexist. The writers filled those ads with puns and slogans that feel both absurd and prophetic. The bright smiles and cartoon mascots were meant to feel like masks stretched too tight, the last grins of a world about to vanish. Fallout's humor has always been hollow in the best way, laughter echoing in an empty room. The subway stations beneath the city were modeled after the real Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority tunnels. The graffiti you see, phrases like, "Don't forget the light" and "still running," were written by the developers themselves as in-jokes about the project's long development cycle. Some of them have dates hidden in the letters' small timestamps of the years when those levels were built. Each piece of graffiti is an artifact not only of the world within the game, but of the team who made it. Bethesda treats its ruins like diaries. The city of Cambridge, sitting quietly beside the Charles River, serves as one of the game's most melancholy spaces. Its church steeples and old universities still stand, their bells long silent. When the Brotherhood arrives, they turn those same rooftops into sniper posts, converting symbols of faith and learning into tools of war. The developers built this area to represent the tension between knowledge and control. The Commonwealth's greatest irony is that humanity's smartest minds built the bombs that destroyed them, and the smartest survivors still build weapons to feel safe. Inon Zur's music for Cambridge uses a single cello line played at half speed, low and trembling, like a thought that refuses to finish. It plays rarely, almost imperceptibly, as you cross the bridges. He called it the sound of memory looking backward. Fallout's score isn't meant to guide you, it's meant to haunt you. The city's skyline was carefully balanced to always give the player a sense of orientation. The CIT ruins, a fictionalized version of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, act as the focal point, visible from nearly any distance. The bright spire of Trinity Tower marks the northern line, while the Mass Fusion building anchors the south. This design ensures that even lost wanderers subconsciously navigate by memory. Bethesda referred to this as emotional geography, the idea that direction is less about maps and more about feelings. The glowing signs in Good Neighbor flicker at slightly different speeds to create rhythm, like the heartbeat of a city refusing to die. The developers coded them manually, using alternating timers to avoid uniform blinking. The result feels alive, imperfect, and soulful. Even the smallest animation in Fallout carries humanity's fingerprints. That's why the game never feels sterile, no matter how much steel fills its skyline. The Old North Church hides the railroad, a network devoted to freeing synths. Its tunnels smell of dust and oil, lit by lanterns that seem one gust away from darkness. Bethesda used yellow light deliberately in that area. In game design, yellow symbolizes hope. The faint dripping of water, recorded from a real underground reservoir, plays randomly to keep the space feeling organic. The railroad isn't flashy, but it embodies Fallout's quiet thesis. Salvation rarely announces itself loudly. It flickers beneath your feet, unnoticed by the powerful. Above ground, the towering figure of the Brotherhood's Prydwen looms like a floating cathedral. Its presence changes the entire world. When it arrives in the sky for the first time, the game subtly shifts its lighting to cooler tones, less gold, more gray, reflecting how idealism hardens into authority. The sound of its engines was recorded from real aircraft turbines and slowed to give the illusion of scale. The developers timed its flight path to pass directly over major landmarks, ensuring that players would occasionally look up and remember they were not alone. At Boston Airport, where the Brotherhood sets up camp, the ground hums with generators and machinery. Bethesda modeled the area to mimic a living military base. NPCs march on schedules, technicians repair ships, and radio chatter fills the background with meaningless codes. None of it matters mechanically, yet it all contributes to immersion. It's the kind of detail you only notice when you stop to listen. Fallout rewards stillness. The Institute, glowing in sterile white beneath the earth, represents the opposite of that chaos. Its smooth walls and polished floors are designed to feel oppressive in their perfection. The developers purposely made the lighting too bright, so the shadows disappear. It's a space without mystery, without dirt, without humanity. The hum of its computers is constant, like a heartbeat on life support. The synths who walk its corridors move with precision that borders on melancholy perfect imitation without purpose. The Institute isn't a villain, it's an elegy for progress without soul. Inside the Institute's laboratories, if you listen closely, you can hear faint breathing under the ambient track. It's not mechanical, it's human. Bethesda added those sounds to make the player feel uneasy, as if the facility itself were alive, exhaling through vents. The design notes describe it as the sound of intellect suffocating itself. Fallout's horror is subtle. It hides in the hum of ambition. Outside, the wasteland continues its patient resurrection. Grass grows through cracks in concrete, vines crawl up billboards, and trees sprout from rooftops. These details are not decorative. The flora in Fallout 4 grows dynamically, its density changing over in-game months. It's a small miracle of coding the planet reclaiming itself, pixel by pixel. Bethesda called it nature's slow revenge. Every leaf that trembles in the breeze is a quiet victory against extinction. The glowing sea remains one of Fallout's most powerful visual metaphors. Standing in its radioactive mist, you can't tell where the sky ends and the ground begins. The developers used volumetric fog with 7 distinct color layers to simulate infinite depth. Lightning flashes reveal silhouettes of ruined skyscrapers like fossils under glass. The storm never truly ends there because it's not weather, it's memory, replaying itself forever. Fallout's world isn't post-apocalyptic, it's self-reflective. The terminals scattered across the Commonwealth form a hidden narrative that ties the world together. Office workers complain about supervisors. Scientists argue over experiments. Parents write final messages to children they'll never see again. Each line of text is a fragment of civilization that still refuses to fade. The developers called them micro-eulogies. They don't advance quests, they preserve humanity. Even the vault's numbered doors carry meaning. Vault 111 houses the cryogenic past. Vault 81 represents controlled community. Vault 88 embodies human ambition. Bethesda purposely skipped many numbers to make players wonder what happened in between. Those missing vaults are the ellipses of Fallout spaces left blank so imagination can breathe. The in-game magazines, from Grognak the Barbarian to Tesla Science, are relics of entertainment as escapism. Each one was illustrated by hand in pulp style, complete with aged paper textures and faded ink. Collecting them isn't just a mechanic, it's a tribute to a time when people found courage in fiction. The covers often parody real mid-century comics, but their sincerity remains intact. They remind players that even in destruction, stories survive, and maybe that's enough. When you sit down at a workbench, the soft clank of tools and rustling of metal create a kind of meditative rhythm. The crafting system isn't about power, it's about peace. The developers designed those sounds to be calming, as if the act of fixing something small, a weapon, a wall, a lamp, could momentarily fix the world. That's why building settlements feels therapeutic. Each hammer strike is a heartbeat of hope. The game's lighting during sunsets is calibrated to last slightly longer than sunrise because the team wanted evenings to linger. They said it reflected the mood of Fallout itself, a world that's always ending but never fully gone. The golden glow spilling over rusted rooftops, the silhouettes of dead trees stretching like hands toward the fading sky, it's not sadness, it's serenity. Every time the player sleeps in a bed, the screen fades with a soft hum, a sound built from recordings of wind tunnels, slowed and looped. That sound, though simple, carries meaning. Rest in Fallout is rare. Sleep is an act of faith. You close your eyes in a world that might not be kind when you wake. And yet, morning always comes. Fallout 4 isn't about rebuilding the past. It's about learning to love the present, scars and all. The Commonwealth's beauty doesn't lie in its perfection, but in its persistence, a world that keeps moving forward, quietly, even when no one's watching. The rust still shines, the wind still sings, the lights still burn, and somewhere, beyond the fog and ruin, the heart of humanity still beats slow, tired, and endlessly kind. The Commonwealth begins to blur when you spend long enough wandering through it. Landmarks fade into silhouettes, and the sound of the wind becomes almost like breathing. Fallout 4's world feels less like a map and more like a dream that refuses to wake. Its ruins are too detailed to be forgotten and too gentle to be feared. There's an honesty to its decay, a kind of comfort in how everything broken still tries to stand. Bethesda's team once said that the goal was never to make a perfect apocalypse, but a believable one where the end of the world feels strangely alive. The neighborhoods that ring Boston, places like Jamaica Plain, Hyde Park, and Forest Grove Marsh, each whisper their own small elegy. Jamaica Plain's so-called treasure isn't gold or weapons, but documents, old tax records, and photographs preserved in a vault. Bethesda called it a satire of value, a reminder that what mattered before the bombs will always matter afterward. Memory, Forest Grove Marsh, flooded and silent, hides stories of families who built homes too close to water when the world started to drown in its own arrogance. The developers used actual water physics simulations to make ripples slide upstairs and against furniture. They wanted it to look like nature reclaiming patience, not vengeance. The city's overpasses and elevated highways are more than scenery. They are veins that once carried life. Now, they're arteries of silence. The reason so many of them are suspended in half collapse is because Bethesda intentionally froze them mid-fall. Their art director said, "The highways in Fallout are falling forever just like civilization. At sunset, the concrete glows orange and pink, like muscle under skin. Beauty clings to everything, even when it shouldn't." If you venture into the ruins of the combat zone, where Kate once fought for survival, you can still hear echoes of the crowd. The soundtrack uses reverberations recorded from empty arenas to simulate ghosts cheering through time. The neon signs buzz with irregular rhythm, blinking like dying hearts. Kate's story isn't just about redemption, it's about exhaustion, how surviving too long becomes its own kind of wound. Fallout's world doesn't judge its broken people, it lets them exist without apology. Down the coast, the wreck of the USS Riptide rests between two bridges, its hull torn open but still stubbornly afloat. The way it leans was modeled after real shipwrecks that slowly settle over years. Its deck creaks in the wind, and you can hear metal flexing under invisible pressure. Bethesda described it as the sound of a world that hasn't realized it's dead. It's one of those details players might never notice consciously, but it shapes how the world feels alive in all the wrong ways. The Mass Pike Interchange, a maze of overpasses and broken roads, was designed to test the player's sense of direction. The sound of wind through those concrete canyons shifts pitch as you move, imitating the Doppler effect of passing cars that no longer exist. The developers called it phantom traffic. You can almost imagine the world running smoothly for a second, engines humming, people laughing, horns echoing. Its melancholy disguised as background noise. Farther west, the ruins of Fort Hagen stand like a relic of military pride. Its gray walls and narrow corridors make it one of the game's most claustrophobic spaces. The lighting was tuned to a pale yellow, the color of old photographs. Deep beneath the fort lies Kellogg, the mercenary whose story intertwines with the player's past. His memories are fragmented, viewed through a machine that lets you walk through his mind. Bethesda said that Sequence was inspired by lucid dreaming memories that feel real but dissolve when touched. Each fragment of Kellogg's life flickers like a dying bulb. A boy, a soldier, a killer, a man who forgot why he started. Fallout's compassion lies even in its villains. The mysterious Silver Shroud questline, set in the ruined neighborhood of Goodneighbor, is Bethesda's love letter to the radio serials of the 1940s. The player dons a hero's costume and delivers justice in pulp style, complete with dramatic narration. Every line is written like an old comic, full of grandeur and sincerity. It's silly, yes, but that silliness carries nostalgia, a longing for stories where good and evil were simple. The developers recorded the dialogue through vintage microphones to capture that era's warmth. Fallout never mocks its history, it mourns it gently. If you stand outside Diamond City during heavy rain, you'll notice puddles forming on the metal flooring and dripping through the grates below. Bethesda used real-world rain simulation data to make every droplet feel natural, bouncing differently depending on surface type. It's an absurd level of detail for a world that's already broken, but that's the heart of Fallout, to care about the little things, even when everything else is gone. The Nuka World amusement park glows brighter at night, its neon lights reflecting off puddles and irradiated sand. The cheerful voice of Nuka Girl still echoes from long-dead speakers, welcoming guests who will never return. The developers called her voice the echo of optimism. When you stand still and listen, the static between her phrases almost sounds like sighing. Even joy gets tired eventually. Inside the park, each themed area mirrors one of humanity's old obsessions: power, adventure, war, space, and sugar. Galactic Zone, filled with stars and blinking lights, plays the sound of an artificial wind recorded from an air conditioning unit. Bethesda used that droning hum to make space feel claustrophobic. Not free, Fallout often inverts expectations, turning dreams into prisons and comfort into cages. The Far Harbor expansion contrasts this entirely. Its fog-choked coasts are quiet, solemn, and human. The wood creaks underfoot, the gulls call distantly, and the foghorns groan across miles of water. The developers said that the soundscape of Far Harbor was built to feel like breathing the island, inhaling and exhaling slowly. The people there talk of the fog like a living thing, and in a way, it is. Fallout gives its landscape souls, not by magic, but by attention. One of the most moving details in Far Harbor is found in the Children of Adam's shrine, where candles burn in concentric circles. The flames flicker at slightly different frequencies, symbolizing devotion fractured by madness. Bethesda programmed those candles individually. Each one burns its own way, as if worship were unique to every believer. Fallout's spirituality is ambiguous, half faith, half radiation, but it always carries sincerity. The small settlements players build across the Commonwealth represent hope, but they also reflect personality. The developers studied how players decorated their homes in Skyrim to understand what comfort meant in digital spaces. That's why the building tools in Fallout 4 feel intuitive yet endless. The act of placing a chair near a window or stringing lights across a broken ceiling turns survival into art. Players rebuild not because they must, but because it feels right. Creation itself becomes healing. Even the game's bugs, the ones players sometimes curse, carry poetry. Bethesda's lead programmer once said, "When you build worlds this big, chaos creeps in, but maybe that's what makes them real." A floating Brahmin, a dog standing on a roof, or a raider spinning midair, each is a reminder that imperfection can be charming. The world is broken in its own universe and broken in ours, but both versions still work somehow. If you look closely at the sky during clear weather, you can sometimes see faint contrails of distant aircraft, ghosts of the pre-war world still looping through the stratosphere. They fade quickly, leaving only vapor. No one ever reaches them. The detail exists purely for imagination. Fallout's world building doesn't end where the map ends, it stretches into longing. The radiant green glow that lingers after radiation storms is a deliberate homage to vintage science fiction cinema. The lighting artists studied films from the 1950s and 60s to replicate that eerie, dreamlike hue, the color of wonder mixed with fear. They wanted the wasteland to look toxic yet strangely comforting, a sky that feels like it could sing lullabies to the brave. Nick Valentine's office in Diamond City contains one of the smallest, most personal details in the entire game, a framed photograph of an unknown woman on his desk. It's never explained, never mentioned. The photograph's edges are frayed and its glass is cracked. The writers said they left it as a secret kindness, a reminder that everyone deserves a private history. Fallout doesn't shout meaning, it whispers it between breaths. The final moments of the main story vary depending on the choices you make, but every ending shares one theme: the cost of belief. Whether you side with the Institute, the Brotherhood, the Minutemen, or the Railroad, the game quietly reminds you that ideals rarely survive untouched. Progress devours peace, loyalty corrodes truth, and freedom, though noble, never comes without loss. Bethesda's writers refuse to create a perfect ending because Fallout's beauty lies in imperfection, in the idea that no matter which path you choose, the world endures. When the credits roll, the music slows to a single haunting melody, a reprise of the main theme played softly on solo piano. The notes echo like fading footsteps through an empty city. It's not triumph, nor sorrow its reflection. The camera pans across the wasteland as sunlight pierces the clouds, and for one still moment, the world feels infinite again. Fallout has always been a story about humanity, not in its glory, but in its aftermath, the quiet persistence of kindness amid ruin. And when the screen fades to black, that faint hum of radiation lingers, the same hum that's been there since the beginning. It's the heartbeat of Fallout itself, a world that died but never stopped dreaming,